How many of you have heard of this minhag of baking matzahs Erev Pesach? How many of you have actually baked matzahs in Erev Pesach? Anyone? Okay. So the truth is, you have one better over me. When I was a kid, I never heard of this minhag. It was only after I got into I became a rabbi in an area where we had a more hamisha olam, a more chassidish olam, that I heard that certain rabbis said, I want to participate, that we're going to go to the mikveh, Erev Pesach, and then after chatzos we're going to bake matzahs. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to bake matzahs after chatzos. What about chametz? I mean, it's crazy. I'm going to get my hands elbow deep into dough. I get chametz under my fingernails. How could I do this? Like, it was so anathema to my sensibilities that I should actually endanger my soul with the potential of coming in contact with chametz after I had so meticulously worked on bedikas chametz and cleaning the house and everything. And now all of a sudden we're going to bake matzahs at this man where chametz is aser. Where does this come from? Well, it comes from the Shulchan Aruch. So let's take a look and see what the basis is for such a minhag, and see if it's something that we find that is compelling for us to. Maybe we'll start doing it after tonight's shiur. Maybe we'll set up our own matzah factory at the BAYT. Was there ever a matzah factory set up here? Andy, you'll get to work on it. All right.
Sure.
All right. Keep him Andy busy for another 6 months. Anyway, says the Shulchan Aruch. It's a one seif simin in Shulchan Aruch, simin taf nun ches. And it says as follows: Nohagin shelo lashush matzahs mitzvah be'erev Pesach ad acher sheish sha'os. Our minhag is not to knead the dough for matzahs mitzvah, which is the matzah that you're going to be using for the seder, until after 6 hours into the day. That's the zman that's the zman when the isser of chametz begins. And this is an isser chametz deoraisa. That's when it begins. Shehuzman hakrovas korban Pesach, and the reason why you have to wait until then is because that's also when the zman of offering the korban Pesach is. So you're supposed to wait until it's time to be makriv the korban Pesach. Now we eat the korban Pesach the night of the 15th at the seder when the Beis Hamikdash is standing, but we're makriv. We bring the lamb to the Beis Hamikdash and we shecht it, and we do the zrikas hadam and all of the avoda in the Beis Hamikdash on Erev Pesach after Chatzos. And therefore, that's the time when you're supposed to prepare your matzahs mitzvah. We'll have to find out why, what the connection is. Uvi yudalit shechal lios b'Shabbos. However, that's all well and good when Erev Pesach is a weekday. But when Erev Pesach is a Shabbos and you're not allowed to bake matzah on Shabbos, so then you have two options. You can either bake matzah motzai Shabbos going into the seder, because you are allowed to bake bread. You're allowed to bake matzah on Yontif. So that would be one option. The other option would be to dispense with the minhag entirely and to push it back one day to go Erev Pesach on Friday, and that would be the time to bake your matzahs. So the Shulchan Aruch says better not to push it off till the night of the seder to start baking your matzahs, but instead bake your matzahs Erev Pesach on Friday. But Loshen Be'erev Shabbos Acher Sheishos, but even then, when you're going to bake your matzahs on Friday, we should wait till Friday afternoon so that you preserve the memory of the minhag for next year. Meaning that next year, when you remember how you baked the matzahs, you'll know that you always did it after chatzos. And that's the reason. Now, why shouldn't you do it Motzai Shabbos, the night of the Seder? So the Meforshim speak out, it's not kedai, because you're going to end up starting the Seder so late if you're going to have to start baking matzahs once Shabbos is over. I mean, really, it's a serious concern, and therefore, better that you dispense with the whatever compelling reasons this minhag has, so that the children will be able to stay up, you'll be able to finish your Seder at a decent hour, and your children will be able to partake in the Afikomen. Yes?
You're not afraid of chametz? Because you bake your matzahs and the buzzer goes off. You see a matzah factory, the buzzer goes off after 18 minutes. And all the matzahs didn't make it into the oven.
Yeah, what are you going to do? What do you do with all the chametz? Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so we got to worry about that, yeah.
You didn't get to it.
No, we didn't get to it yet. Now, the truth is, theoretically, I wouldn't want to do this matzah baking in my oven in my home, right? I don't think anyone would want to. My wife would absolutely kill me if she saw me baking something with flour and water on Erev Pesach. So there probably was a place where a person could go to bake it, and then you could just walk away from it afterwards. It would be a tanur. Maybe you'd be mafkir it afterwards, whatever you...
Maybe I'm mixing up something. Pizza, then you're going to have chametz on pizza.
No, chas v'shalom, this is not chametz, this is matzah.
But the matzah, the ones that don't get baked, the ones that are flipped over.
You'll have to make sure you do it right.
Okay. You know, the ones that don't make it
I see. I see you're quite shocked at this halacha.
I've been to the factory. Buzzer goes off and everything gets rolled out and gets thrown out.
Yeah, when you see it the first time, it is quite astonishing, yes. But this is what's brought in the Shulchan Aruch. Okay. Now the question is, what is this based upon? So the Torah brings down two Makaros in Chazal that seem to be in conflict with each other. One is the Tosefta. The Tosefta in Maseches Pesachim Perek Beis Halacha Chaf Aleph says as follows: Yotzin b'matzah mituveles. So it says that there are certain kinds of matzah that you're allowed to use to fulfill the mitzvah of achilas matzah. Now, just to clarify, we understand that there's a prohibition of chametz for all 7 or 8 days in the Golus of Pesach, but there's a specific chiyuv, a specific obligation to eat matzah the first 2 nights in Golus at the Seder, and the requirements for that matzah are much more than just the fact that they're not chametz. The requirements are that it has to be l'shem matzah's mitzvah, it has to be l'shem mitzvah. So, it says that there are certain things that you can fulfill your obligation with. The matzah can be spiced, it can be partially raw, and the other thing that the Tosefta says that you can use, we'll see that's in the Yerushalmi, the part that's partially raw, but you can use different kinds of spiced matzah, and then it says uv'matzah yishana. You can even use old matzah, provided that you made it l'shem Pesach, that for the sake of using it for the mitzvah of matzah, you can use old matzah. Now, what do we mean by old matzah? Is it the word, does it say on the box 5771? Is that what we're talking about? Well, possibly. I mean, that's certainly something that's some of the achronim entertain, is what we're talking about over here, and of course you have to worry about the issue of Chadash as well, which is something that some of the poskim discuss. But Matzah Yeshana, the simple understanding is that it wasn't baked on Erev Pesach. So the Tosefta says it's okay if it wasn't baked on Erev Pesach. Don't worry, you could still be Yotzei with it. Ooh, what a relief, right? Okay, so now, and it's like we're all saying to ourselves, what do you mean? That's called Matzah Yeshana, that every time I open a box of matzah that was not baked on Erev Pesach, I'm settling for old matzah, meaning that it seems from the Tosefta, yes, you could be Yotzei with it, but you know, it's old matzah, it's aged matzah, it's not the best. The Yerushalmi says something that's a little bit cryptic in its language, and the Yerushalmi is where the Torah, as we'll see in a second, gets this source that perhaps there's this compelling reason that a person should only use matzah on the night of the Seder that was baked on Erev Pesach, and it says. Here it says Yotzin b'matzah ava. It talks about all the different kinds of matzah that you can be Yotzei with. You can be Yotzei with thick matzah, but it can't be thicker than a tefach thick, which that would be a really hard shoe. And that's corresponding to the lechem hapanim. Yotzin b'matzah na. You can fulfill your obligation with raw matzah as long as it's partially baked. And then finally, if you look at the underlined section, matzah hayeshanet hafluk to the Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. As far as old matzah, that's a machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And Beis Shammai says you cannot use old matzah. Beis Hillel says you could use old matzah. And on that, Amar Rabbi Yosa or Rabbi Yossi, he says Divrei Hakolhi. He says everyone agrees you cannot use old matzah. Mekeven shelo asa l'shem haPesach davar bari shelo dikdek ba. And it seems from the Yerushalmi that the reason is that since it was not made with careful intent for the sake of Pesach, then there's a fairly good assumption that a person was not careful with its preparation. Now, what that means exactly is the subject of speculation. But, at face value, the Yerushalmi, at least quoting one opinion in the Yerushalmi, says that Matzah Yeshana is problematic to fulfill your obligation. And this, by the way, is not just in the Yerushalmi in Maseches Pesachim, second perek, but it's also in Masechet Sukkah, first parak as well. And we'll see why, what its connection to Sukkah is in just a moment. By the way, something about Yeshana and Sukkah. Anyone know offhand what I'm referring to? Like a Sukkah Yeshana. Very good. What is a Sukkah Yeshana?
You have to prepare it this year.
You have to prepare it this year. You can't use last year's Sukkah. This is also a Machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Right? So this is something quite relevant, and as the Korban Ha'edah speaks out, he says, Matzah Yeshana. The Korban Ha'edah is one of the commentaries on the Yerushalmi. He says, Ki heicha deplihi Beis Shammai Beis Hillel b'Sukkah Yeshana b'per kama d'Sukkah Beis Shammai posel Beis Hillel machshir and achanomi pligi le'inyan Matzah Yeshana. That according to the Yerushalmi, it's the very same machlokas. Just like they argue about using a sukkah that was old. In other words, perhaps it wasn't made for the purpose of sukkah. So too, Pesach, you can't use matzah that was baked with either before 30 days, or in our case, which is the case by sukkah, or in our case, that wasn't baked on Erev Pesach mamish. Amar Rabbi Yossi divrei akoli hacha b'matzah yeshana afilu Beis Hillel modu de psula. Beis Hillel will agree that matzah yeshana is puzzle, even though he doesn't agree by sukkah. And the Korban Ha'edah's taich, in what the Yerushalmi means over here, of the Kevin Shalo Asa, Lahamatzah L'Shem Pesach, Dover Boru Shalo Diktek Bakaroi V'Yeshlochush L'Ktsas Chimutz. He says that the argument is you have to worry that maybe there's chametz embedded in this old matzah, because, Lamaisa, what basically the Korban Ha'edah's approach is, a person baked matzah in his oven, meaning that he baked bread that didn't have yeast in it. He didn't give it a chance to rise. But the fact that Pesach was 6 months away means that he wasn't so medactic to make sure that it didn't have a chance to leaven. He wasn't thinking specifically, I'm baking matzahs for the upcoming holiday, and that's the reason why we tell you, if you have leftover of those unleavened breads, you cannot use them for Pesach, for the simple reason is that you may not have been so medactic, because you weren't even thinking about Pesach coming up at that time.
Is it called old matzah if it was baked Erev Pesach the year before and has all the chumras involved?
That's a very good question. It's something that's undertaken by the Achronim, and I don't have the answer. I haven't done enough research. I just know that this is the subject of much discussion in the Achronim. Okay. The Pnei Yoshua on Masechet Sukkah undertakes a short discussion of this very issue, as do a number of Achronim, the Korban Ha'edah and the Aruch Laner, and a number of other Achronim undertake this discussion basically because Tosfos quotes this Yerushalmi in Masechet Sukkah on Daf Tes Amud Aleph, and after quoting the Tosfos who quotes the Yerushalmi, the second line of the Pnei Yoshua says, L'chora shitas ha-Yerushalmi lo asya Sugya Shiur. It would seem at face value that the Yerushalmi does not agree with the Bavli, because he says the maskinan time of the Beis Shammai to poslam the Sukkah Yeshana mikra. He says because after all, in the Bavli, what is the Gemara's conclusion as to why there's a machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? Why do Beis Shammai hold that an old sukkah is not usable? The answer is because it's based on a pasuk. And what is the pasuk? The pasuk is unique to the holiday of Sukkot, because it says the Chag HaSukkos Taselach. It says you shall make for yourself sukkahs, which means it has to be l'shem sukkah with a specific kavana. And if you didn't have that specific kavana, then the sukkah is no longer valid according to Beis Shammai. V'im kein b'matzah lo shayachach milsa. He says, and we don't have that same pasuk by matzah. The Beis Shammai kiven deleka kroda b'matzah lo ksiv ta'aselach. It doesn't say matzos ta'aselach. It just says ushmar temes hamatzos. Watch over the matzos. It doesn't say matzos ta'aselach. Perhaps you could make a gzera to be makish tesvav. You could. It's possible. There are those who want to make that argument, but the Pnei Yoshua does not reckon with that. He doesn't. It's an excellent point, but he doesn't raise that issue. V'lekala meimar, the time of the Beis Shammai b'matzah mishum dichsiv chag hamatzos lashem. Maybe you'll tell me that you have a similar pasuk by matzah, because it says chag hamatzos Lashem, and Lashem means that it has to be Lashem Matzah's mitzvah, and that's why Matzah Yeshana is not kosher. He says, Im kein kosher lehefech. He says, because I could tell you that's Adarabba. He says, if that's the argument that it says Chag HaMatzos Lashem Dilma Beis Hillel Nami Modu B'Matzah Mehai Time Agufa Kivin De B'Matzah L'Yisrech Lashem L'Drasha B'Yisrech Nakam B'Sukkah. He says, because we have a similar pasuk by Sukkah, which says Chag HaSukkos Lashem, and we use that pasuk when it says Chag HaSukkos Lashem. We use that pasuk to teach me that you're not allowed to derive personal benefit from a sukkah. That teaches me that a sukkah is asur b'hana. But there is no such halacha that we have by matzah. So if you're going to tell me that the words Chag HaMatzos Lashem, that it shall be a celebration of matzos for God, is coming to tell me this halacha, that it has to be specific with intent, then why would Beis Hillel take issue with that? Beis Hillel doesn't have any other use for that pasuk, like he might have by sukkah. So why then should there be a machlokus, and the kasha would then be on Beis Hillel, not so much on Beis Shammai? So therefore, the Pnei Yeshua's conclusion is, he says, Im kein nira mized l'shitas ha-Yerushalmi ha-v'taima de Beis Shammai misvara o l'mitzvah de Rabbanan ba'alma. And therefore the Yerushalmi, which maintains that there is a machlokus between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel as far as this matzah Yeshana, is based on an Isser de Rabbanan. That Beis Shammai holds that there's an Isser de Rabbanan of not using Matzah Yeshana. Beis Hillel holds there's not a mitzvah de Rabbanan, an Isser de Rabbanan of using Matzah Yeshana. And by extension, Rabbi Yossi, who says that everyone holds that there's an Isser, it's only an Isser de Rabbanan. Okay. In any event, that's the shita of the Pnei Yehoshua. We'll hold it here in the Pnei Yehoshua. Let me just bring up another point that comes up as a result of this. So, by the way, what we've seen so far is that we've seen that at least according to the Pnei Yehoshua, the reason why that there's this Isser does exist in Yerushalmi for Matzah Yeshana. It's not necessarily a Deoraisa, but it's only a Derabanan. There are other Achronim who take issue with the Pnei Yeshua, but I just wanted to give you sort of like a sample of how the Achronim grapple with this, what the makor, what the source of this Isser of using Matzah Yeshana. Take a look at the Mishnah in Maseches Pesachim Perek Daled Mishnah Aleph. It says, Makam shenagu la'asos malacha be'arvei Pesachim ad chatzos osin. Makam shenagu shelo la'asos ein osin. A very famous Mishnah. The Mishnah says that it all goes according to the Minhag of where you live. If in your community they do work on Erev Pesach before Chatzos, so then you too are allowed to work on Erev Pesach before Chatzos. If you live in a community where people do not work, so then you also are bound not to work. But everyone seems to only have this issue before Chatzos. What about after Chatzos? So after Chatzos, it seems that the consensus based on this Mishnah is that you're not allowed to work no matter what the minhag of your community is. After Chatzos and Erev Pesach, you're preparing to get ready for the Seder. So Rashi over here in the Gemara, where the Mishnah also appears, so he says, why would a person have a minhag not to do work the entire Erev Pesach? Rashi says, Kedei shelo yehi tored b'malacha v'yishkach biur chemtza, so that a person should not get busy with work and he'll forget to destroy his chametz, and he'll forget about shchitas ha-Pesach, he'll forget about shechting his korban Pesach, and here's the punchline, v'tikun matzah l'tzarach halayla, he'll forget about preparing his matzah for that night. Now, that's Rashi. Rashi on the Bavli already is saying this. So it's clear from Rashi that this minhag is important to Rashi too. Because otherwise, if there's this concern that you're going to forget about making matzah, just buy it from Sobeys. I mean, come on. I mean, make your matzah 6 months in advance, for goodness sake. Why do you have to make matzah on Erev Pesach? And the Tosfos Yontif picks up on that in his commentary to the Mishnah. He says, Peirish, he says, Ad Chatzos, this is the bottom of sheet number 1. He says, Peirish Ad Chatzos Tolen B'Minhaga. Although Mechatzos Ulamala Ika Isura, he says, from Chatzos and onwards, there's no minhag issue. It's mamish halacha. You're not allowed to work after Chatzos. Well, the divrei harav, the Yoav Taima Kipirish Rashi Mishum Bir v'chulei v'tikun matzah shel mitzvah. He says the Rabbi Bar Tanura says the same thing as Rashi, that the reason there's a prohibition of working on Erev Pesach is to help you get prepared, and part of that preparation is to give you time to bake matzah. He says, Nira da'af bizman hazeh ka'amrinan. The Tosfos Yantif says, I see no reason to think that this is only back in those days when they were bringing Korban Pesach. It would seem that this is just as relevant today. And then he quotes from the Magid Mishnah on the Rambam, the Tosfos Yantif does, and he says, V'iksha hamagid v'imkein ka'arvei chag hasukos nami haresh yesh lo litroach b'sukasa. He says, why is there only a prohibition to work after Chatzos and Erev Pesach? There should be a prohibition to work after Chatzos and Erev Sukkot also for that very same reason. You have to be matriach to build your sukkah. You have to be matriach to buy your lulav and esrog, etc., etc. He says, Ela hatam k'deisa b'Yerushalmi demei Chatzos shlitas haPesach ve'eno b'disha tehei asuk v'malacha v'karbancha karei v'kan devara. The Magid Mishnah therefore takes issue with Rashi. And he says that the reason why you're not allowed to work after Chatzos is not because of the contemporary mitzvahs that are related to Pesach, because if that were the case, there should be no difference between Sukkot and Pesach. There's as much preparation, perhaps we could even argue there's more preparation on Erev Sukkot, especially for those of us who work. You know, if you don't have a teenage son to help build your sukkah, and you got to do it on your lonesome, I would venture to say that it's going to take you more hours to put up a sukkah than it is to set the table and cook and go shopping for Pesach, right? Depending upon, well, it depends if you have one of those modular sukkahs or however. But the Magid Mishnah says that it can't be that it's because of preparing for the Seder, because then we would have the same halachas by Erev Sukkot, and therefore it must be because of Shlitas Korban Pesach, in which case this Mishnah is a throwback to the times of the Beis HaMikdash. It's not addressing contemporary Pesach of today. So, V'li nira liyashe, but the Tosfos Yantif disagrees, and he says as follows. He says, the shining tzarchei matzah me'asiyah sukkah. He says, because the preparations of making your matzah is fundamentally different from preparing to build your sukkah. The sukkah regila lahakdim la'asosa uzrizin makdimin mimotzo yom HaKippurim. Is because making a sukkah does not have to be done on Erev Sukkot. There's reason makdim in the mitzvahs, like we know that there's a Ramah in Shulchan Aruch who says that immediately after Yom Kippur a person should rush out to start building his sukkah right after Yom Kippur is over. There's reason makdim it. There's actually a preference to begin early to build your sukkah, not to leave it to the last minute. And that's why there's not this special provision that you can't work on Erev Sukkot, because we expect you to have taken care of this from before. Avol Matzah, but when it comes to Matzah, Harei Amru b'Yerushalmi, Oser Matzah Yeshana. But Matzah Yeshana is Oser, so I don't have a choice to bake my Matzah early. I have to bake my Matzah on Erev Pesach after Chatzos, as we'll see why momentarily. V'no kuli alma shelo la'afosa kodem vav shos. And the minhag is not to bake the matzah until after Chatzos, and that's specifically why the Mishnah says that you have to stop. Everyone agrees, no matter what the minhag is, you must stop working once Chatzos comes, so to give yourself time to bake the matzah. Kizman shchita, because that corresponds to the time when you can shecht your Korban Pesach, k'deisa b'tur simin taf nun ches, mishum kach ika tirda be'erev Pesach. And that's why there's more work for you to do on Erev Pesach than there is to do on Erev Sukkot. And that's why Chazal made this special provision to prohibit you from working on Erev Pesach after Chatzos. Okay, so now we've sort of seen this Yerushalmi creep its way into our Babylonian nomenclature of Rashi, the Bartanura, and Tosfos Yantif, and we're talking now about the Mishnah, which is universal to both the Bavli and the Yerushalmi. Not like the Pnei Yoshua has suggested that this whole issue is only according to the Yerushalmi, but not according to us. It seems like the Tosfos Yantif is arguing that this is Mishnaic in its origin, and the whole provision of prohibiting us from working on Erev Pesach is because there's a universally accepted minhag or universally accepted practice that we must prepare our matzah, we must bake our matzah on Erev Pesach after Chatzos. So this is now getting pretty serious, fellas, right?
Was this done at the time that the temple stood?
Was it done? Well, that's not so much the question. The question is it done contemporarily? That's really the bigger issue. It seems like there's more. The Magid Mishnah wanted to argue that it was only done in temple times. The Tosfos Yantif has saying no. Adarab, it's even done nowadays that we have this issue. So let's go to the tour. The Torah is really the source for this discussion coming into Shulchan Aruch. And he states, the Torah in Siman Taf Nun Ches states as follows. Ein maschilin lihis asek b'pas b'yodalid ad achar vav shos, that we don't start baking our matzahs until after chatzos, after the 6th hour. V'isa b'seshuva, or into the beginning with the 6th hour. V'isa b'seshuva ma'isa be'echad sha'afa matzahs koydem dalid shos, u'kvar bir chemtzo. There's a ma'isa brought down in a tshuva from the Gaonim, that there was a person in the times of the Gaonim who already burned his chametz, but it was still within the first 4 hours of the day. Va'asru raboseinu hamatzah, and the rabbi said, your matzah cannot be used for the seder. I mean, that's pretty wow. That's wow. And what's the reason they said you cannot use that matzah for the seder? The iskish lepesach, because the law of matzah is connected scripturally to the law of Pesach. The kaven de Pesach, because it says al matzos umrorim yochluhu, you have to eat the korban Pesach together with matzah. And therefore, since kaven de Pesach eno nishchat elam yivav shos ulamayla, af matzah came. That just like the korban Pesach may not be slaughtered until after chatzos and Erev Pesach, matzah cannot be prepared until after chatzos and Erev Pesach. Halacha. This is what he's bringing down. This is the Torah. And he's saying that it seems to be a deoraisa, not like the Pnei Yeshua was saying on the Yerushalmi.
What about also then the Morah? So you should be...
In Achinami, the Morah is a separate discussion. But yeah, you'd have to, you'd have to grind it. You'd have to prepare it. I mean, Morah is less problematic because there's not really much for you to do with the Morah, other than pull it out of the ground. But it's ready to eat. But okay.
It becomes chametz, or is it just asa?
No, it can't be used. It cannot be used. Just like if you shech the korban Pesach before chatzos, it's not a kosher korban. Right. So too, if you bake, it's not chametz. You're not over in bal yirah and bal yimatzah if you have it in your possession. It's just that you can't use it to fulfill the mitzvah of achilas matzah, the night of the first night of Pesach. Yeah.
Only the derisive part, which is the first night, you could use it during Pesach as well.
Sure, you could eat whatever you want as long as it's not chametz, but you can't fulfill the mitzvah of matzah, which is dafka the first night. And where there's a mitzvah aseh of the Erev tochlu matzos, you can't do that with this matzah, just like you can't eat a korban Pesach that wasn't prepared properly. Yeah? Okay. Avol. So that's the tshuva from the Gaon. Okay? But if it stopped there, we'd really be in Haktatzaros, right? Yes.
If you consider your comments in the morning, what do you do with flour that you're going to make matzah with?
Well, that's a good question, but flour, you see, is not chametz. At least not raw flour. Raw flour you could use on Pesach. In theory, it's as long as it's it's like flour on Pesach is like nuclear grade plutonium or whatever. In other words, if you know how to handle it properly, you can use it, right? If you have the proper preparations, flour is flour. It only becomes chametz after a leavening agent is introduced to the flour and it's mixed with liquid. Okay? So he says, "Avol Rabbeinu Eliezer Hagadol v'Rebbi Shmuel HaKohen Itiru." These are either early Rishonim or late Gaonim, and these great rabbis permit you to use matzah yeshana. You don't have to use matzah that was baked after chatzos. Ach lechatchila yesh li zaher mishum chaviva mitzvah b'shaita. He says, but it's just an inyan of lechatchila. Lechatchila, if you have the opportunity to bake the matzah after chatzos, we say chaviva mitzvah b'shaita. That how beloved is a mitzvah when you do it in its proper time. Not that it's an absolute requirement, because even though it's true that matzah and Pesach are scripturally connected, that's only the achila which is scripturally connected, but not the hakrava, not the preparation and the bringing to the mizbeach. Va'avi ha'ezri hevi tosefta yotzin b'matzah yeshana, and the Avi ha'ezri brings this tosefta that we saw before, that you could be yotze with matzah yeshana. provided that you make it for the sake of the mitzvah of matzah. Because of the Yerushalmi Poligat Tosefta, va'oster afilo atzol l'shem Pesach. And the Avi HaEzri, who's an early Rishon, writes that the Yerushalmi disagrees with the Tosefta. He's quoting, of course, now this Rabbi Yossi or Rabbi Yosa that we saw in the Yerushalmi, who says that even according to Beis Hillel, you cannot use matzah yeshana. And that's true even if you made it l'shem Pesach, which is not so clear from our version of the Yerushalmi, because if you look in our version of the Yerushalmi, it seems that, at least the way the Korban Ha'ida understood it, that the whole problem with matzah yeshana is that it probably was not prepared with the care to make sure that it's not chametz. But if a person knew in advance, as he's making his matzah in January, that I'm making this l'shem matzah mitzvah, then l'chora the Yerushalmi would not have a problem either. But that's not the way the Avi HaEzri learned the Yerushalmi. Could be he had a different gears than the Yerushalmi. However you understand this, the Kaven the Yerushalmi oster roi lahachmer shelo lasos kodem chatzos. And because we have a Yerushalmi that says that a person must dafka not use matzah yeshana for the seder, a person should be machmir and only use matzah for the seder that was baked on Erev Pesach after chatzos. And again, if it ended here, it would also be hakbetzaras, because none of us. I mean, maybe there are some of us who do, but I would venture to say that the vast majority of Yidalach don't subscribe to this practice. But then at the end of the Seif, he talks about what to do when Erev Pesach is a Shabbos, and he discusses the possibility of either baking the matzah the night of the Seder, like I talked to you, like we saw in Shulchan Aruch, or perhaps baking it on Erev Shabbos. And at the very last line he says, Ba'ani ra'isi beBarcelona, I happen to note a minhag in Barcelona. And what is the minhag of Barcelona? Mehamedaktikim, the people who were extremely meticulous, Shahayu ofin kol ma shetzrichim lamoed mikodem hamoed, that they did just the opposite. They made sure that all of their matzahs were prepared before Erev Pesach. She'im yisariv imo mashuhu mechametz she'yisbatel kodem isuro. And the reason why they did that is because they were scared. They were scared. What if chas v'shalom, there's a little pocket of chametz that gets mixed in while I'm kneading the dough? And what if leavening is not something that is all of a sudden the switch on or switch off. It's either unleavened or leavened. The leavening process is a gradual process, which is a scientific, physical reality. And sometimes you're not aware that a tiny little piece of dough may have become leavened unbeknownst to you. And then you have problems because if that chametz is introduced to a mixture after the zman biur, after it's now prohibited to have chametz in your possession, then it's not batal. The advantage that you have of preparing matzah before the zman biur, before chatzos, is that if chametz were to get mixed into a mixture of non-chametz, so then it would become batal. And that's the reason why the Jews of Barcelona were makbid to dafka. They said, while there's a compelling reason to fulfill this practice, we're more concerned about the chashash of an Isser Kares on Pesach, and therefore we're dafka going to eat matzah that was prepared before, so that there's no chashash of consuming chametz on Pesach. Yeah.
Why should it bother them? We have the Rishonim that says the matzah no, semi-cooked matzah, which is flour and water, not fully cooked, which is gebrochts by definition almost.
Gebrochts? What's gebrochts?
Well, it's gebrochts. Hummus by definition.
No.
It hasn't been cooked.
No. So if you look carefully at the Yerushalmi, it says that it has to be cooked to a certain point, such that when you pull it apart, you don't have threads of dough, pulling apart like when you pull apart taffy or something like that. It has to be cooked to the point where if you pull it apart, it comes clean apart. So it's partially baked. And that's baked enough to retard the leavening process. Okay? Okay? All right. Okay. Now, we have, and the last thing that we're going to do tonight is we're going to look at 3 different achronim to see their approach as to how they explain this. I think I'm going to skip to the Aruch HaShulchan first, because the Aruch HaShulchan tries to explain why, even though we have this compelling language in the Torah, So we have the Jews of Barcelona that he ends up with this one-liner. Okay, fine, very good and dandy. But what about all of these Gaonim and Rishonim who were so makbid to prepare Matzah on Erev Pesach? What about the fact that they felt that, at least according to the Yerushalmi out there, and at least the way their version of the Yerushalmi, there's an obligation not to use Matzah Yeshana for the mitzvah of Matzah. So how come we're not concerned about that? So comes along the Aruch HaShulchan and he says, and this is in Siman Tov Nun Ches Siv Gimel, it's on the bottom of page 2, and he says, V'yoser nira lanias daiti mishum dezeh yadua, shebizman hakadmon, he says, the reason why we're not so makbid is because it's well known that in earlier centuries, lo hayu ofen kol hamatzos kodem haPesach, people didn't bake matzah well before Pesach like we do today in Europe. Ela hayu ofen b'chol yom mimei haPesach pas liyom zeh. People used to bake fresh matzah every single day of Pesach. Sayontiv, Sakal Moed. You didn't have matzah brai. You know what you had for breakfast? You had pat chama. You had fresh bread every single morning of Pesach. You baked fresh matzah. That's geschmack. Matzah brai, but fresh matzah, warm matzah out of the oven. Can you imagine how geschmack that would be? Every morning you'd have that. He says, and it's so indicated by the words of the Tur. He says that the practice of the Barcelonian Jews was something novel that was not known before. He says, "Va'ani ra'isi beBarcelona mehamedaktikin shayu ofen kol masha tzricha lamoed mikodem hamoed shemisari v'imo mashu michometz yisbad mikodem yisuro." He says there were these really machmir people in Barcelona that were dafka makpid to only have matzah that was baked before Pesach. He says, "V'zeu k'minhag shalanu," but he says because of Zilad Var Chiddush. He says, but that's what everyone does today. But the Torah seems like, wow, this is a new thing, a new chumrah. And yet it's the chumrah that we all subscribe to. So he says, V'lochein k'shay ofen b'chol yom, v'lechol paschama. He says, but back then, people used to bake fresh matzah every day to have warm bread. He says, Im kein lama yigara matzahs mitzvah shelo yofu osa samach la'achila. He says, you want to know why there's a compelling reason to not have matzah yeshana? Because it's not lefi chavod the seder that every day of Pesach for breakfast you'll have hot matzah, warm, freshly baked matzah, but at the night of the seder you're going to have cold, crumbly, cold, not pleasant, stale matzah. He says v'hainu acher chatzos, and that's why there's a kapeda dafka to do it after chatzos, not because of the inyan that it's connected to sukkah. Not because there's a problem that it's not going to be l'shem matzahs mitzvah. Not because there's a chashash that it's going to be chametz. No, it's because you want to be mechabed the seder properly. You want to be mechabed the mitzvah properly, and therefore it's only befitting that you should have warm matzah, fresh matzah the night of the seder. And the Or Zaru even writes that there's a preference to have warm matzah the night of the Seder because when you eat it together with the moror, it'll take the bite out of the moror. It's well known that warm bread, when you connect it with moror, it takes out the bite out of the moror so that it won't injure you. That's why they baked it towards evening. Another reason is because you want to show your endearment of the mitzvah by doing the mitzvah preparation right before the mitzvah. V'gam kedei sheyehenu mehamatzah be'erev. The paschama tov harbe yosem mipas tzonenes. He says also because you want to make sure that you have the benefit of having warm bread that was freshly baked, and that's much tastier than cold bread. Heimafu matzos avim, and he says, and remember, chevra. He says, in the old days, everyone had thick matzahs. Remember, what did I show you from the Yerushalmi? They can be as thick as a tefach, right? The matzahs. The matzahs back then were like the lafa, right? It was really much more like a lafa bread. And Yehoshua, you know that even among Sfardim today, many of them, the Moroccans, the Teimanim, I think. The Teimanim to this day have soft matzah. But that's what everyone used to do. That's what everyone did. And what's better, a warm laffa or a cold laffa? We all know that a warm, freshly baked laffa, there's nothing like it in the world. Lo kishalanu. V'hatzonin kashe la'achila, and the cold laffa is difficult to eat. V'havehidr mitzvah, and therefore you're definitely beautifying the mitzvah. V'hahekesh sha'amru, and the connection that they make to Sukkot, they said that's just la'asmachta ba'alma. Or I'm sorry, the hekesh they make to Korban Pesach rather, it's just an asmachta u'lezikaron leKorban Pesach. There's reason b'mitzvahs. And therefore the reason why in this tshuva that the Torah brings from the Gaonim, that they told a person who would bake this matzah early that it's usher for you to use that matzah, that was just, in those days, lemigdar milsa, to chastise the individual and to make sure that everyone would be doing the mitzvah in the most optimal way. It was here in Minhag so that because they wanted people to be very meticulous in the minhagim of Klal Yisrael. Aval etzleinu she'ofen kodem ha-Pesach, but for us, we go like the Barcelonians. We always bake before Pesach. We have the flat, crunchy matzahs with the radel. Ein tam leminhag zeh, v'lachein be'emes ha'idna rak tzas mehamedaktikin nogin bazeh v'chol Yisrael ein yodim mizeh klal. And that's why only very, very few medaktikin practice this today, and the most of the Jewish people are not even aware of this at all. Like a sort of, it's completely off the radar for most Jews, this mitzvah. But you see how we've moved from a really important minhag to no one even knows about it. It's fascinating how this evolution took place. So I just want to point out that that's according to the Aruch HaShulchan, but according to many other authorities, especially in the Olam HaChasidut, there is a special kepeda, perhaps based on Inyanei Sod. There may be other issues as well that I'm not familiar with. But if you take a look at the Rav Shulchan Aruch, which is from the Balatanya, the Heilig Balatanya, you'll notice that he completely details this practice and tells us how to do it and advocates it very strongly. Which is why Chasidim Vanshe Ma'aseh today do put this into practice. And therefore, he says, not like the Aruch HaShulchan, who writes that no one does this anymore. He writes in Sif Aleph and Siman Taf Nun Ches, Nohagu kol Yisrael shalololu shamatzu shal mitzvah acher chatzos hayom be'erev Pesach. He says, that's the minhag, that we wait until after chatzos in order to prepare the matzah's mitzvah, the matzah that we're going to use for the Seder. And later on in the same siman, he goes through this whole elaborate process of preparation that every Jew should carefully self-bake the matzahs that he's going to use, the three matzahs that he's going to use, the Kohen Levi Yisrael matzahs that he uses at the Seder. They should be carefully marked which one is matzah number 1, which one is matzah number 2 in the baking process. Because you want to show that your chavivos for each one of these matzahs, and you want to show which one is going to be used for the top matzah, which is going to be used for the middle matzah, which will be a little bit larger because you have to break it in half, and which was going to be used for the bottom matzah, which is going to be used to make your korech sandwich. So he's very, very careful to itemize all of these different things. And he says, Shematzis mitzvah hukshal mitzvahs Pesach. He says that this is a legitimate hekesh, a legitimate scriptural connection to the Korban Pesach. He says, not only that, I'll go even further, he says, Ulefi she'ena kol bikiyim b'chatzos hayom mamish, lefichach nachol lahamtin chatzi shah acher chatzos hayom, ki kein hayu mamtinu b'shchitas ha-Pesach shelo shachtu ad acher sheishu nechza. It's not enough just to wait until after the beginning of hour 6. You have to wait until you're 6.5 hours, because not everyone can tell, because not everyone has a watch. So you got to make sure when you're looking up at the sky to let you know when is chatzos, make sure it's a half an hour after the 6th hour has begun, so that you know that, or the 7th hour I should say, the 6 hours are over, now you're into the 7th hour, it's got to be 6.5 hours, so that you know for sure that it's after chatzos. But then he does acknowledge in Sif Beis, he says, B'chol ze'enu elo minhag lechatchila, avol me'ikar hadin, afilu matzis mitzvah shnefu kama chadashim l'fnei ha-Pesach yochol latzeis ben yedei chovas lechatchila. He says, really, me'ikar hadin, this is all just a minhag. You could be yotzei with matzahs that were baked even many months before. He says, because this is only an asmachta. He says, however, avol He says in Sif Gimel, Uvishas hadechak ma'amidin al ikar hadin. He says, when you don't have any other choice, you can be somech on the ability to use aged old matzah. Such as, for example, if people bake matzah and send them off to faraway places, then we can sanction you relying on the ikar hadin and not subscribing to the minhag. Mutar lafos afilu kama chadashim kodam haPesach. V'chein hameforshim meyabasha liyam kama chadashim kama haPesach ofen matzahs kodam yitzias mibeisam. He says, therefore, if you have a legitimate reason because you're going on a long journey, then you can rely on the ikar hadin and not do the minhag of baking matzah on Erev Pesach after chatzos. Aval shelo b'shas hadechak ein l'shanos haminhag. But if it's not b'shas hadechak, you should not change the minhag. The Balatanya is very strong in this area. Okay, take a look at the Mishnah Berurah, and with this we will conclude. I also have at the end of the Shiur, there's a commentary of the Meshech Chachma on Chumash, who quotes this Yerushalmi and tries also to demonstrate that the Bavli and the Yerushalmi are cholik with each other. But I don't think we'll go into that tonight. So the first thing that you need to see is that the Mishnah Berurah is very clear that it's preferable to subscribe to the people of Barcelona because, like he says, the minhag is not to be makbid to bake matzah after chatzos. And he says, I looked through all of the achronim to find the reason why we don't do that anymore today. He says, and in the third line he says, Mipnei sheyesh kama deyo shafilu be'erev Pesach b'mashu kasher mavur le'el v'zeh kasher lizar shelo yimtzu af mashu chametz b'hachitim shelo yu mitzumachim. This is very difficult that there's not going to be even one granule of flour that has not leavened in some way, that has not begun to germinate. And therefore that's why we're makbid, like the rabbis of Barcelona had instituted. We don't want to take any risks. And he says that there are some people, he quotes the Marmor Mordechai, who says that while most people are makel, there are some people, if you have the wherewithal to be machmir, you should. And here's something very interesting. Who said Gabrachs before? Yeah. But it wasn't. It was a nevuah kitana. We'll see in just a second. You had a nevuah. You had a nevuah because, the one place where the Mishnah Berurah talks about Gabrachs is in guess where? In Siman Taf Nun Ches. So if you were ever wondering what is the Mishnah Berurah's opinion about Gabrachs, now you'll find out. Okay, so take a look. The Mishnah Berurah says in line 2 of Sif Katan Dalet, he says, "V'dad mitzad hadin muter lafos matzah b'Pesach." He says the halacha does allow a person, like you questioned before, how can a person make matzah on Pesach when you do it? He says you're allowed to bake matzah on Pesach. That halachically is permitted. Ach hamedaktikim nogim lafos akol kodem Pesach. But people who are medaktik, like the Anshe Barcelona, they make everything before. He says, as we've seen from the tour, he says, if a little chametz creeps into the mixture before Pesach, before the Zman Biur, so then it's batel. But if you already have chametz in your possession, it can't be batel. There's no way it can be batel once the Isser chametz is already started.
But it can't be created, right? It's already been leavened. Physically speaking, it can't be created again.
What do you mean it can't be created?
From a physical point of view, it can't rise if it's already once you make the matzah.
Yeah, but the concern is that before the baking started, there was already some leavening that had started within this dough, unbeknownst to you.
But once you bake, it can't become chametz. Can't become chametz
unless you hold of gebrachs, which we're going to get to see in just a moment. But the point is, the concern is that there was some leavening that was put in this mixture before it was baked. And that's why he says, if you start kneading the dough on Erev Pesach after Chatzos, and there's some chametz in there, it's not batel. You'll end up eating chametz on Pesach. And that's why we subscribe to the Anshe Barcelona.
Because in the same situation with Ribato, which we've done the day before.
That's right. Matzahs that have chametz in them, that accidentally there's chametz that crept into the matzah, and they were baked in January, they're batel. they're bottled by the time Pesach arrives. It's completely kosher lePesach. Okay? Upashut. Now here comes the zinger. He says, it's obvious, he says, because Shenef Kodem Pesach, Afilu Hayabo Mashu Chametz Kemach, Kavarnis Arev Batel, if it was baked before Pesach, then any chametz that may have crept into this dough is completely bottled. Umutter acher kach, and then it would be completely permitted levashel hamatzos bePesach. Then you could go ahead and do what? Take your matzahs, crumble them up into kinedalach, and cook them in water, cook them in soup on Pesach. There's no problem with that, because anything that was in there that may have been chametz is already now bottled. De'ein chimot tzachar afiyah, because as you said, once you've baked, there's no leavening possible, right? V'yesh anshe ma'aser shemachmirin al atzman. There are some people who are machmir, and what's their practice? Ve'ein shorin, ve'ein mevashelin matzos bePesach, and they don't soak their matzahs, they don't cook their matzahs on Pesach, which is known in the vernacular as gebrachts, right? Which literally means what? Who's the Yiddish? Broken. Gebrachts, right? Broken. Mechashash, out of a fear, Shema nishar ma'at kemach v'soch hamatzos mebifnim shalom yilosh yafeh va'al yedei hashiriyah yitchametz. What's the fear? The fear is that maybe there was a little bit of flour that did not mix well with the water, and as a result of you soaking it in water now, it'll come to a leavening state. In other words, flour that is not mixed with water doesn't bake. So therefore, maybe that flour you do have to worry about, that it got mixed with a little water on Pesach and it'll become leavened. That's the concern of gebrachts. Ba'ayin b'shari tshuva simin tav samach the mitzad hadin ein lochush lazeh. The Shari Tshuva says that there's really no reason to be choshesh for this. The achzuke isura lo mechazkinon. That we don't assume, we don't have to make that assumption of Isser, that Isser is present. Ubifrat b'yameinu shenoge lasos rikikin dakin. And surely nowadays, where the minhag is to make these very, very flat, radled breads,